Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we were taking a bit of a sledgehammer to some concepts that are often misunderstood in spiritual practice. Puja, Vrata, and Bhakti.
Yeah, I mean, for lots of people, these words probably bring up images of, incense, maybe fasting, old festivals.
Or maybe just those exotic Hindu customs you glimpse in a travel show.
Exactly. And that common idea, that's precisely what our source material really pushes back against. We tend to see them as just actions, right? Lighting a lamp, fasting for a god, singing a song.
Static things.
Static things, yeah. But the ancient texts we're digging into, they show something much more, dynamic, more fundamental. These terms, puja, vrata, bhakti, they're not just rituals. They're presented as personifications.
Personifications, you mean like actual entities?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Real distinct stages of spiritual energy, energies that actually guide how human consciousness evolves and gets refined.
Okay, that's a huge shift. Moving from just actions to seeing them as dynamic, personified energies, cosmic energies almost.
It's the core idea for this deep dive. We're not just looking at customs. We're looking at, you could say, spiritual engineering.
Spiritual engineering, I like that. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start? The sources trace the very beginning of religion back to one basic human feeling, don't they?
They do. It all starts with awe. If you go way, way back in human history, religion didn't kick off with complex rules or books.
No dogma.
No dogma. It started when early humans bumped into things they just couldn't control or figure out. A massive storm, the sun rising and setting, fire suddenly appearing.
Or even just the reality of death. Things bigger than them.
Exactly. That feeling of awe, that natural wonder, that's the ignition point. And what's really interesting is seeing how our relationship with those things changed over time.
Like fire, for example.
Yeah, fire is a perfect example. First, we used it practically cooking, warmth, simple survival. But then humans transformed that same fire into, a spiritual tool.
You mean like Homa and Havan?
Yeah.
Using fire to call on divine beings.
Precisely. Making that jump from just using fire to invoking something higher with it, that's a massive leap for human consciousness.
It shows this deep, persistent drive we have, doesn't it, to connect our everyday world with something, higher, more mysterious.
Absolutely. And that whole evolutionary line from simple awe to these more structured ways of connecting, that's exactly where puja, the first of these energies we're talking about, makes its entrance.
Got it. So our mission today is to trace this spiritual evolution. We need to figure out how puja, vrata, and bhakti each play a distinct role in refining our consciousness, moving us from just doing things to really understanding.
From action to realization,
Yeah.
that's the path we're mapping.
All right, let's start with puja. Now, if you ask most people, they'd say puja is about offering something, right? Flowers, water, incense, maybe a little chant.
That's a common understanding, yes.
Yeah.
But the source material gives it much more philosophical weight. It actually calls puja a bridge, the first doorway.
A bridge, a doorway. How should we understand that? It sounds quite significant.
Well, the key is stepping back and remembering the personification idea. Puja isn't just something you do. The text describes puja as a she.
A she, a feminine energy.
Yes, a real, vibrant, generous, feminine energy in the spiritual world. She's that first point of contact, like a welcoming mother figure who doesn't ask for your qualifications or, a theology degree.
So she's the gatekeeper, but a welcoming one.
Exactly, a liberal gatekeeper. That's the term used. Because she represents the absolute lowest barrier to entry for making a spiritual connection. Anyone can approach.
Okay, so this liberal energy, when it shows up in our world, it becomes an activity, an action. And the sources say something pretty radical about puja's nature here, don't they? About it being universal.
Radically universal, yeah.
Yeah.
The tradition never claimed exclusive rights to puja. That's a critical point.
Meaning?
Meaning, the source material argues that essentially every culture, everywhere on Earth, has practiced puja in some form or another.
Why? What makes it so universal?
Because it's the most basic, spontaneous way humans express sincerity. It's like the universal language of devotion, before words or complex doctrines even come into play.
So you don't need a specific holy book or a specific language.
Not at all. Think about it. A farmer in, say, rural Tamil Nadu, just folding his hands before starting work in his field. Maybe a simple prayer for rain. That's puja.
Okay.
Or a monk in an Egyptian desert, kneeling in silent reverence. Puja. Or a shepherd somewhere in Jordan just bowing his head, genuinely thankful for finding water.
It's the sincerity behind the action.
Precisely. Whenever you offer something, whether it's a physical object, a quiet prayer, or just a moment of pure, focused inner gratitude, you're tapping into that puja energy. It's about the genuineness, not the religious label. It's that fundamental act of looking up, acknowledging something beyond yourself.
And the texts use this interesting analogy for how it works, like paying a spiritual tax. What's that about? Maintaining inner order.
It's a really practical way to think about it, actually. Just like, society needs taxes for roads, schools, keeping things running.
Infrastructure.
Right, infrastructure. Our inner world, our psychological state, it also needs regular upkeep to maintain order and structure if you just let it go.
Chaos. Anxiety, confusion.
Exactly. Chaos takes over. So puja, that act of regular, sincere devotion, it's like paying that small maintenance fee for your inner self. It keeps the, let's say, spiritual channels clear. It keeps you receptive to higher organizing forces.
So the benefit you get from puja isn't about how fancy the ritual is.
No, not at all.
It's directly proportional to how sincere you are when you pay the tax.
That's it, exactly. And that's why puja is so incredibly inclusive. To really drive this home, the sources bring up a detail that's,
Yes.
well, it's pretty surprising.
What's that?
They mention that even an animal can offer puja and receive blessings according to its own karma.
Wait, an animal?
Hmm.
Seriously, that seems like a huge claim. We need to pause on that. How do they justify that? A non-human consciousness performing puja.
It goes straight back to that core idea, sincerity. The argument is that puja functions at the level of raw, pre-verbal consciousness. An animal, operates mostly on instinct, immediate feelings.
Right.
So if, let's imagine, a cow approaches a sacred spot, maybe where offerings are left, or near a representation of a deity, and it does so with a pure, focused impulse, maybe a feeling of gratitude for finding food, or even a sort of wish for its calf to be safe.
That focused, sincere impulse itself is puja.
That's the argument. The energy recognizes the purity of that impulse, that intention, regardless of whether there's complex theology wrapped around it. It's a kind of transaction based purely on intention.
Wow. So the blessing received would be appropriate for the being.
Yes, aligned with its specific karma. A human doing puja might get mental peace or help with a problem. An animal performing it, well, maybe it gets a slightly better environment or perhaps a tiny nudge up the evolutionary ladder in its next existence.
The exchange is immediate, tailored, and all about sincerity.
It perfectly defines that idea of a foundational liberal gatekeeper. It's open to literally all conscious beings capable of sincere feeling.
Okay, that sets the stage incredibly well. Puja is the first step, open to everyone, fueled by sincerity. But humans didn't stay simple, did they? Our minds got more complex, our questions got deeper.
Exactly. Simple sincerity, while always essential, wasn't enough to satisfy that growing intellectual drive, that need for structured spiritual development.
Our consciousness, like you said, it's like a muscle. It needed a tougher workout.
It did. And that need for refinement, for more structure, that's what called forth the next stage, the next energy, Vrata. Vrata is designed specifically to demand discipline, structure, and adherence to rules.
Okay, so if puja was the welcoming nursery school, Vrata sounds more like, what, high school? Or maybe even spiritual boot camp. The sources call it high school spirituality, stricter rules, heavier syllabus.
Stricter rules, definitely. And higher stakes, too. The meaning is right there in the word itself. Vrata literally means a vow or discipline.
A vow. Okay.
It marks a clear shift. You're moving from that spontaneous, universal devotion of puja to something much more intentional, structured, a real commitment. It's the stage where we stop just being curious and actually start trying to master a spiritual curriculum.
So what are the key things that make Vrata so different from puja? What defines it?
Primarily, it's about procedure and timing. Puja, can be done almost anywhere, anytime, with whatever you have. Vrata, not so much. It demands specific structured procedures. They're called vidhis. It requires specific timings, often tied to astrology or certain days.
And stories, too.
Yes, and often the recitation of detailed stories that give context to the vow. These stories aren't just background. They often provide moral lessons, but are also part of the ritual structure itself. You have to recite them correctly.
And it often needs a trained professional, a brahmana, a teacher. That seems like a big change from puja, where sincerity was enough. Why the need for an expert now?
Good question. It's because Vrata is usually undertaken as a precise spiritual project. It's designed to achieve a specific, often measurable result.
Like a material benefit, wealth, health, protection.
Often, yes, those are common goals. And to tap into that higher level energy effectively, to make sure the contract, so to speak, is honored, the procedural purity becomes really important. The Brahmana's role is to ensure that purity, making sure the mantras are pronounced right, the offerings are correct, the timing is exact.
So puja is like a heartfelt prayer, maybe written on a napkin. Vrata is like filing a very specific, notarized spiritual contract with all the I's dotted and D's crossed.
That's a really good analogy, yes.
Mm.
Think about specific vratas, like Satyanarayana Vrata or Ganesha Vrata. They're known to be powerful. They make explicit promises of certain outcomes if they are performed correctly.
And the benefit isn't just the outcome, is it? It's the process itself.
Absolutely. This stage forces the mind to learn discipline. You have to focus for maybe hours or even days. You often have to make a sacrifice fasting, giving up certain foods or activities, and you have to learn patience, waiting for the results. This kind of mental training was crucial for the developing human mind.
It sounds demanding, but potentially very beneficial. But
Right.
here comes the modern problem, right? The sources call it the Kali Yuga challenge. This specific age we're in, it makes Vrata particularly vulnerable.
Vulnerable to corruption, yes. This is a really sharp critique in the text we looked at. In our age, time is short, attention spans are tiny, and maybe genuine purity is harder to come by. So what happens?
It gets commercialized.
Hugely. Vrata often gets reduced to just a transaction. People feel they don't have time or maybe the know-how, so they delegate it. They pay a priest somewhere else to do the ritual for them.
Or they try to follow along with a YouTube video.
Exactly. Watching a recording, thinking that just seeing the external actions is enough.
And the source material really questions that, doesn't it? It asks point blank, can you actually outsource your spirituality to a video? Can you live stream divinity?
And the ancient wisdom, the Vedic answer, is a very firm no. The divine response isn't triggered just by the perfect physical actions of the ritual. That's just the outer shell.
So where's the response located?
It's located in the consciousness, in the intention of the person behind the act. When a vrata is done just for money by someone who doesn't care, or when the person who wants the benefit just delegates it entirely without personal involvement, without that deep devotion, it stops being vrata.
It's no longer spiritual discipline. It's just a payment, buying a potential outcome.
Precisely. The whole point, spiritual discipline needed to purify your own mind through the vow, through the sacrifice that gets bypassed. The mind hasn't done the work, it just paid a fee. And the sources say this whole transactional problem is made worse by another weakness inherent in many Vrata traditions,
Which is?
the reliance on fear.
Ah, right. That's a big one. Many Vrata stories, the sources point out, include threats. Punishment if you break the vow or mess up the ritual.
Yes. They often instill this sense of obligation mixed with fear. If you miss the Tuesday fast, or if you forget this specific flower, disaster will strike your family.
That raises a huge theological issue, which the sources tackle directly.
They do. They ask, if God or the divine is fundamentally about love, would a truly divine being punish you harshly just because you missed an appointment?
It's a powerful question. What's the verdict from the sources on this fear-based approach?
They criticize it quite strongly. They basically call that punishing aspect ego wrapped in a deity mask.
Ego wrapped in a deity mask.
Wow. Yeah. It confuses genuine devotion with mere obligation based on fear. A deity demanding adherence to super-specific, conditional rules, mainly to avoid punishment. That's not reflecting divine love. That's reflecting a very human, conditional ego that's been projected onto a divine image.
So Vrata, while it was a necessary step for teaching focus, discipline, structure, it also opened the door to problems. Commercialization on one hand, and a relationship built on fear rather than genuine faith on the other.
Exactly. It was a vital stage in refining the mind, teaching it valuable skills, but it clearly wasn't the final destination. Its own limitations, and especially the way it gets distorted in our current age, pointed towards the need for another shift, a correction.
A correction that also lines up with the broader cosmic timeline, the yugas.
It had to. The method had to change because the student humanity had changed so drastically. #3, spiritual projects through the yugas, context and correction.
Right, this brings us to the yugas, the cosmic ages. We really can't grasp why Bhakti is presented as the ultimate stage without understanding how the whole spiritual curriculum changes depending on the age we're in.
That's the fundamental context. The Vedas don't just see yugas as stretches of time. They're distinct epochs defined by the quality of the collective human consciousness, its purity, its capacity.
You can't expect someone today with, a smartphone buzzing every 5 seconds to have the same focus as an ancient yogi meditating for years.
Precisely. The spiritual assignments have to be adjusted for the student's capability.
Okay, let's walk through that. We start with the Satya Yuga, the golden age. What was consciousness like then? And what was the main spiritual practice?
In Satya Yuga, the sources say the mind was naturally pure. like a perfectly clear crystal. People lived long lives, minds were calm, focused, not easily pulled away by material stuff. So the main spiritual project was tapa.
Intense meditation and austerity.
Yes, deep, prolonged meditation. Silence itself was considered the highest worship. Just fixing your mind on the divine was possible, apparently for thousands of years, and it could lead to almost instant realization.
Because the tool, the mind, was already in perfect working order.
Exactly. But then purity began to decline as we moved into the Treta Yuga. The mind started getting a bit restless, agitated.
So silent meditation wasn't enough anymore.
It became much harder for most, so the focus had to be externalized. The spiritual projects shifted to things like puja, homa, havan, those fire rituals we mentioned, and especially vrata.
So the structured, elaborate rituals of Vrata became necessary because the mind needed something external to focus on, a prop for a wandering mind.
Unnecessary prop, yes. These external actions forced concentration, demanded adherence to procedure. Then came the next age, the Dwapara Yuga.
What was the focus then?
By Dwapara Yuga, the sources say the primary spiritual project became about establishing permanence. This was the great age of temple building.
Building huge, intricate temples. Why temples specifically?
Well, the idea was to create lasting physical homes for God on earth, stable centers for community worship. The individual mind was perhaps becoming too restless, even for complex rituals alone, so these grand temples served as anchors, unifying points for devotion.
Okay, Satya Yuga, Tapa. Treta Yuga, rituals like puja and vrata. Dwapara Yuga, temple building. Which brings us to, now, Kali Yuga.
The current age, described often as the age of quarrel, hypocrisy, chaos, confusion, and definitely commercialization. Our lifespans are short, our attention spans.
Measured in seconds sometimes.
Right, and our minds are just bombarded with distractions, material desires. So if we tried to seriously undertake the incredibly complex vratas of the Treta Yuga, or the super intense top of the Satya Yuga,
We'd fail. Most of us would fail spectacularly.
almost certainly. The scriptures acknowledge this. They recognize this inherent limitation, this declining capacity. And so, faced with this reality, the divine curriculum, the spiritual requirement, underwent a really radical simplification.
Okay, what did it simplify down to?
It was streamlined into one single, primary, accessible activity, japa.
Japa. Just chanting the holy names of God.
Yes, chanting the holy names.
That seems almost too simple. Compared to meditating for millennia or building enormous temples or doing these incredibly complex vratas, this is presented as the golden key for our age.
It is. And the simplicity is deceptive. It's presented as simple out of mercy, but incredibly potent out of efficiency.
Yeah.
The sources are emphatic about this. Japa in Kali Yuga isn't just one option among many.
What is it then?
It's said to carry the combined spiritual power, the collected benefit of all the different methods from all the previous yugas put together.
Wow. Hold on. The combined power? How does that work?
The logic is this. In earlier ages, the mind was capable, but maybe the connection needed elaborate external actions, the tapa, the homa, the vrata, to purify the mind and the environment so that the person could eventually achieve deep remembrance of the divine. That remembrance was the ultimate goal.
Okay.
But in Kali Yuga, our minds are chaotic, and the external environment is easily corrupted, easily commercialized. So the process is flipped. The ultimate goal, that remembrance, is brought right to the forefront.
Through the name itself?
Through the vibration of the holy name. Japa cuts directly to the necessary internal state remembrance, connection, without demanding these huge, practically impossible external actions first.
So it bypasses the need for perfect external conditions.
Exactly. It shifts the whole focus inward. The sources say something like, you don't need to light 1,000 physical lamps anymore. You just need to light the one lamp of remembrance inside yourself through chanting.
That directly counters the big problems with Vrata. We discussed the commercialization, the fear.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to commercialize something that just requires your own breath, your own voice, your own concentration. And because the aim is simply remembrance, connection, love, that whole fear-based, punitive aspect just dissolves.
The relationship changes.
Completely. The sources stress that the Lord, the divine, ultimately desires love, not fearful obedience. Love is what sustains real, lasting faith. Fear only gets you temporary compliance.
And this radical simplification, this focus on love and remembrance through japa, sets the stage perfectly for the final energy, bhakti.
It's the foundation upon which bhakti stands as the culmination.
So bhakti arrives as the ultimate correction, the graduate level course, you could say. It moves completely beyond the transactional nature and the fear element we saw creeping into Vrata.
Yes, bhakti is fundamentally about relationship. It's purely love-based. And interestingly, like puja, Bhakti is also described both as a personification in the spiritual realm,
Who is she personified as?
as the consort, the wife, of Lord Vishnu. She embodies divine compassion, grace, that pure devotional energy,
And as an activity,
and also as the highest spiritual activity, the highest state available to us in this journey.
we defined puja as primarily an act, and vrata as primarily a vow. How is bhakti fundamentally different in its definition?
Bhakti isn't defined as just an act you perform at a certain time, like puja, nor is it a specific vow you undertake for a period, like Vrata. Bhakti is described as a complete lifestyle,
A lifestyle, meaning
meaning it's about integrating that spiritual consciousness, that devotion, into every single moment of your life. It's not compartmentalized. It doesn't depend on being in a temple or having specific items or following a strict timetable.
so no priest needed, no expensive offerings, no complex procedures. The connection is direct and continuous.
Direct and continuous. That's the ideal. The practice becomes primarily internal.
What does that internal practice look like?
It revolves around continuous japa, that chanting we just discussed, and also tapa, but here tapa means more like inner austerity.
Inner austerity, like controlling the mind and the senses.
Exactly. Controlling the impulses, focusing the thoughts. In a true bhakti lifestyle, every breath can become a prayer. Every action, every thought is ideally offered up with devotion. The goal is to cultivate this constant, deep, internal relationship with the divine that isn't dependent on external factors.
That's a profound shift. And the sources mention something unique about how bhakti was accepted by the divine compared to other paths. Something about Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu.
Yes, there's a fascinating point made. It's said that Brahma, the creator, didn't particularly seek worship for himself. Shiva, the destroyer or transformer, offered his essence in the abstract form of the linga. But Vishnu, the preserver, the maintainer of cosmic order,
He accepted bhakti.
he uniquely accepted Bhakti as his eternal consort, his partner.
What's the symbolism there? Why Vishnu specifically?
It symbolizes that for the aspect of the divine concerned with preservation, sustenance, and order, which is Vishnu's domain, pure, unconditional love and devotion, Bhakti is the ultimate inseparable principle. The highest, most stable relationship with the Supreme isn't based on power or obligation, but on love.
Okay, that leads us to arguably the most significant concept in this whole discussion, a karma. Bhakti is said to grant this state. What exactly is a karma? It sounds like it goes beyond just good karma.
It absolutely does. This is really the summit. Normally, we're all bound by the law of karma, right? Action and reaction.
Do good, get good results. Do bad, get bad results.
That's right. But the crucial point is that even good karma is still a chain. Why? Because if you do incredibly good deeds, you still have to take another birth in the material world to enjoy the rewards of those good deeds.
Yeah.
You're still bound here.
So even vrata, which might promise good things like health or wealth, those are still karmic results that keep you tied to the cycle of birth and death to experience them.
Precisely. You're still caught in the system. A karma, on the other hand, means action that generates no reaction, neither good nor bad. It leaves no karmic footprint.
How is that possible? How can action have no reaction?
It's achieved when actions are performed with absolutely pure selfless love, and the intention is completely surrendered to the divine. You're not acting for your benefit, for any personal reward. You're acting purely out of devotion.
Because there's no selfish motive, there's no karmic debt or credit generated.
Exactly. The action produces no karmic residue that needs to be balanced out later. It's performed in a state of connection, not transaction.
So this is where the journey truly culminates. In bhakti, the transaction finally ends.
It ends, and the pure relationship begins. The devotee isn't calculating returns anymore. They're simply acting out of sustained love. And that state itself is inherently liberating.
The consciousness becomes free from the whole karmic cycle.
Completely free. It's the final degree. All the discipline learned in the Vrata stage, all the sincerity cultivated in the Puja stage, it all transforms into the effortless freedom and deep realization of bhakti. Hashtag VB. The human evolutionary journey and final thought.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. We can really see puja, vrata, and bhakti mapping out a clear path, can't we? A kind of educational journey for our own consciousness. It's like spiritual engineering, guiding us step by step.
It's a beautifully coherent structure when you see it laid out like that.
Yeah.
Puja really serves as the pre-primary stage, doesn't it?
Yeah, driven by basic curiosity, that initial awe.
Teaching us simple sincerity, making that first tentative contact with something beyond ourselves. It doesn't ask for much, just that basic honesty, that openness.
Then comes Vrata. That's definitely higher primary or maybe even high school, the stage of disciplined effort.
Necessary schooling. Absolutely. It teaches the mind how to focus, how to structure itself, how to make sacrifices, how to be patient. It forces us to take spiritual growth seriously, even though, as we saw, it carries risks, rigidity, fear, commercialization.
But necessary risks, perhaps, to build that mental muscle.
Arguably, yes. And then finally, bhakti. That's graduation.
Liberation.
Yes, the freedom that comes not from discarding discipline, but from internalizing it so completely that it becomes effortless love. Understanding leads to surrender. The external rules become less important because the internal connection is constant.
So for someone listening, maybe trying to figure out where they fit in this picture, are there internal signs, markers that show you might be naturally moving from one stage to the next?
That's a great practical question. The sources suggest some clear internal shifts. For example, the transition from puja to vrata often begins when you stop just doing rituals out of habit.
And you start asking why.
Exactly. You start intensely questioning why you're doing what you're doing. You develop a thirst for structure, for deeper understanding. Simple, vague sincerity isn't quite enough anymore. You want to know the mechanics, the rules, how it all works spiritually.
Curiosity evolves into a desire for discipline and knowledge. Makes sense. And what about that really big leap? Moving from the structured, sometimes fear-tinged discipline of Vrata into the freedom of Bhakti.
That seems to be fundamentally a shift in allegiance, moving from fear to love.
How would you know that's happening?
It happens when you stop seeing your relationship with the divine primarily as a list of duties, obligations, or appointments you have to keep perfectly to avoid negative consequences.
You stop worrying about punishment.
Yes. And instead, you start to actually feel God or the divine presence in a more direct, loving way, rather than just fearing him or trying to appease him. When your natural default state starts shifting towards gratitude, towards devotion, towards wanting to serve out of love, regardless of whether you're getting specific material boons in return, that's a strong sign you're moving into the energy of bhakti.
It becomes less conditional.
Much less conditional, more of a constant state of being.
This has been fascinating. It really reframes puja, vrata, and bhakti. They're not just static rituals from the past. They feel alive, like these dynamic, personified energies actively guiding humanity's journey.
From ignorance towards illumination, yeah. From just doing things externally to simply being in a state of connection internally.
From seeking rewards to surrendering the results. And crucially, from being bound by karma, both good and bad, to finding the ultimate freedom of a karma.
And perhaps the most potent takeaway for us, right here, right now, living in this very chaotic, complex age, the Kali Yuga, is the incredible simplicity offered at the end of that journey.
That the divine curriculum itself recognized our limitations and simplified things drastically for our benefit.
That the highest spiritual practice available, the most powerful tool, isn't necessarily the most complicated ritual or the most extreme austerity.
It's love, pure, simple love, expressed through remembrance, through chanting.
Which brings us right to that final provocative thought we want to leave you, the listener, with. Think about our world today. It's incredibly complex, right? Information overload. Everything seems to be for sale. Constant pressure.
It's overwhelming.
Totally. So in the midst of all that complexity and commercialization, how truly radical is this ancient idea? The idea that the golden key to genuine spiritual progress, the single activity powerful enough to encompass all the spiritual achievements of the previous, more capable ages, is something as simple as chanting the holy names.
Why would that simplicity hold such immense power now?
Exactly. What does that ultimate simplification tell us about what the divine really values in human consciousness? Why does the most accessible path, the one hardest to corrupt or commercialize, now carry the greatest potential?
Something definitely worth pondering as you reflect on this journey from puja's simple sincerity through Vrata's discipline to bhakti's ultimate freedom through love. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.